I'm delighted to be joined by a brand new guest, thanks to the wonderful Sam Sorbo for connecting us, and that's Barbie Rivera. Barbie, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Whenever I hadn't come across your book and whenever Sam had sent it over, it was intriguing, fascinating subject on education and the battle and the fight that many of us are learning that we're having. And there is the picture there. Enough is enough. Exposing the education system after their failed attempt to label and drug my son. And we're going to get into your personal story, which is what the book, the personal story, and then looking at the education system, and then you end up on what you had to do, your actions on it. But you're the founder and principal of H.E.L.P Miami, a K-12 private school, author of Enough is Enough, and we're going to go, and then I read the Epoch Times article, and they did a 16-page article about this in 2022, and the links will be in the description, whether people are watching or they're listening on any of the podcasting apps later on. But tell us, right back to 1991, you were brought into the school, and your 6-year-old was labeled as mentally handicapped by the school. So yeah, tell us that situation as a parent.
Okay, so I never let him get officially labeled, but that's what I was told he suffered from. And we're talking the second Friday of the school year, like the second Friday. And to be completely honest about my son, and I'm not one of these parents of my child does no wrong, he never tells a lie. I have eyes in the back of my head. I know my kids, right? But Damon was bilingual when he was 6. I don't speak 2 languages. His grandfather is Cuban, and they were bonded, from birth. First grandson. Very well behaved, like really easygoing. He would, very creative, like after dinner, put a blanket over the dining room table, make a tent, would always draw, would play, would ask questions that were like, I understand these questions. So in school, I'm thinking they're going to love this boy. They're going to love him. And he's going to love school based on my experience in first grade. Anyway, it was a disaster from the get-go. That Friday, I'm called in and I'm told my son is mentally handicapped and will need pharmaceuticals, most likely for the rest of his life. And I'm like, what is even happening? First of all, a teacher has no qualifications to tell me that. I'm not going to the teacher about cavities or about a skin rash. I'm not going to go to the teacher for mental health. So I'm like, what is happening here? And the teacher said he confuses the B and the D. And I'm like, well, they look alike. They factually look alike. And I think with practice, going back to my first grade, where first grade was really one full school year of learning your numbers to 20, and your alphabet. Like, we didn't get into long vowel sounds until the end of first grade because you really needed to work on the basic sounds of the letters, right? Anyway, they gave him 2 weeks and that was it. And I'm like, well, he doesn't confuse a cow and a refrigerator. So he knows differences. And then to further make their point, he also confuses the 6 and the 9. And I'm like, they look alike. But the seriousness of how grave a situation it was that my 6-year-old did not know the difference 2 weeks into the year, 10 days, 10 days into first grade, he could not determine. He made the mistake of swapping B and D when on his handwriting, and he made the mistake of identifying 6 and 9. And I told the teacher, I'm like, okay, I'll take him off of all family financial responsibilities. He will no longer write checks or balance the checkbook. And I thought I was being funny. They didn't like that at all. They thought that I was degrading or demeaning them. I go, but what you're saying is ridiculous. Well, don't you care about his future? I go, yeah, but I'm also not panicking about what dress I'm going to wear to his wedding. He's 6. Again, my argument over their head. I was very pregnant with my 4th child. So I did something, it's like you have life regrets. This is a life regret that does not go away. I kept my son in school for the entirety of 1st grade because I didn't think I could homeschool him. I was pregnant. I had a toddler that wasn't quite 1. My daughter was 3. And I'm like, I'm going to make a disaster out of my 6-year-old. And I feel like I left my son in a burning building for my comfort, because and I get it. I was pregnant. But anyway, by the end of 1st grade, my son thought he was stupid. That's what school gave him. He was convinced he was unwanted and convinced he could not learn. And I'm like, there's no 6-year-old on this planet who has the right to feel that way, mentally handicapped or not.
So
anyway, that's how I got started.
I mean, look, I'll pick up a number of those points, but now as you look all the way back and have conversations with many other parents, often you find you're in a situation and you're alone. This is only you. No one else understands or is struggling with this. And then you begin to realize actually the story is maybe replicate elsewhere. And we'll get into kind of failings in the education system and all of that. But as you just look back, how have you begun to understand that what happened with you was not just a single issue, that there are those cases happening across the country?
No, totally. And the scary thing is like, shortly after I started homeschooling, I became a single parent. But even as a single parent, my kids, we had dinner every day. We had cleanup time. The kids had chores. I'm talking when the baby was 1. Now, he's not going to be breaking rocks on the train line or anything like that, but he can help put things away. So they had responsibilities. I read stories to them every day. I'm talking years. So my son was well cared for. Like he was given ample attention. And he showed it. His manners he behaved very well, very respectful, spoke 2 languages. Clearly this boy's loved. And if he is targeted, we're in trouble as a society. Like that was I couldn't believe what I was experiencing because I never thought that, I always had this viewpoint of, ADHD, those are those crazy kids that run around a restaurant or scream in a grocery store. And, now my kids are all grown and I think most of that is just bad parenting. Sorry, parents, but I really do.
At the beginning, the rush to medicate is something that we are all now used to, and we look around, probably even more in the US than the UK. There's a drug that will fix everything in your life, and then you get another drug to fix whatever the first drug has caused. But for teachers to talk about giving drugs to children, that's not, was this teacher medically trained? Has she been a nurse or a doctor or anything? So how did she come back? How does a teacher who is there to teach children how to read, to write, to learn, to do maths, how do they then decide, actually, this pharmaceutical company will give you a drug and that's what your child needs after 2 weeks?
Well, because of drug studies that are run in the school and the checklist that the teachers do. Like, I'm jumping ahead, but when I decided to homeschool my son, instantly I had 4 or 5 friends that are like, I don't want to send my child to school. And when I started homeschooling Damon, now I was no longer pregnant, but now I had a 10-month-old, a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old, and Damon had just turned 7. So all that I homeschooled was 2nd grade and kindergarten. I wouldn't take anybody else. So friends of mine who had children, you know, you kind of have family, you hang out with people your own age, and everybody has kids the same age. And the kids that were over at my house for sleepovers, the parents wanted me to homeschool them. And I got so full that's when I became a private school. Because as soon as you move a homeschool from a home into a commercial location, now your class is a private school. The point to that is as soon as I became a private school, now I'm on private school mailing list. I get flyers about cheerleading uniforms, about football. You know, none of that applies to me. I'm still small, but I'm on that list. So I'm also on the list for drug studies. And again, I'm shocked at what I'm about to tell you. And I actually write about this in the book because it's horrific. Two pharmaceutical reps, they were actually PR students from a local university, came in with a drug study that they wanted my participation in. Red flags instantly up. I'm like, what is this? But tell me what it is. There were 3 levels of participation. The first level, for every name, address, and phone number that I submitted to the drug study, I get $100.
Wow.
So, Peter, I was told I could use my Christmas card mailing list of my great aunt Gladys, who is in her 80s. I'd get $100 for her. There's no way she's going to participate in an ADHD. You know, it's even their fraud is fraud. Mm-hmm. So the second level of participation, I was given a sample mental health checklist for me to fill out. It had 30 items on it. I did not have to sit face to face with the student. This was my opinion by observation. And things on the checklist were, student has bad handwriting. That's a signal for ADHD. But guess what? They don't teach proper handwriting anymore in school. So the kid develops his bad habits. You can't read what he writes. It's not corrected anywhere along the line because heaven forbid we correct the student. We don't want to, you know, hurt them in any way. Like, that's ridiculous. Anyway, so if I submit the mental health checklist with name, address, and phone number, I get $500 per checklist submitted. Now, Peter, if I sit with you and your wife and I get you to participate in the drug that they were doing the drug study on, which was at that time, it was a form of called Intuniv, which Intuniv's been on the market, but this was like a timed release. It was some variant of this drug. If I get you to put your child on it and enter the drug study, I get $5,000 per child. And I'm told by these drug reps, the money could go to me personally because I own the school, or it could go to the school because, let's face it, Barbara, your school is really small and ugly and it's in a shopping center. That was supposed to inspire, like, oh, it is, you know. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be nasty now. I'm like, well, let's face it, I'm in Miami, the cocaine capital of the world. If I want to use drug money, I'll just put an ad on Craigslist. Hey, cocaine dealers, I need some of your funding. Like, but because the cocaine dealers aren't looking for the 5-year-olds to get on drugs or the middle schoolers. It's ridiculous. And then I was told that they couldn't believe that I refused the money, could not believe it. And I was told I was the only educator in all of South Florida, daycare, private school, Christian schools, Catholic schools, charter schools, public schools. I was the only one to say no.
I remember looking at doing drug studies as a grown up, thinking actually that could be a way to make money, but it sounds as though the pharmaceutical industry is allowed to use children as lab rats. That's in effect.
Right. That's right.
Wow.
And that's how you have the teachers, because the teachers will get offered kickbacks. Now, you don't call it that, but hey, fill out this mental health checklist on a student who's on 3 different pharmaceuticals. Could you fill this out once a month? We'll give you $25 in gift cards. I'm like, what is this?
How, I want to get on the education, but just that thing. I remember I've traveled probably 8 different times to the US in the last 2 years. And one thing that really strikes me is the adverts for different medical procedures, different drugs on TV. And I realized that actually Americans are bombarded with them much more than we. I don't think we really have any adverts for medication on TV. And yet in the States, it's the norm. So it is a whole culture that actually is bombarded and soaked in actually drugs are the way to fix things. And whenever it happens whenever that message is given in regards to children, I mean, you start early, I guess, and then you've got a clientele that is hooked on your products.
Yes. No, and I, from my experience, now this is my experience. I've never gone to college. I've done what I've done out of the passion to save my kids, right? And then I can't be blind to what's around me. That's why I'm still doing what I'm doing. The longer these kids are on these medications, the harder they are to teach. But to me, that makes sense because some of the drugs are in the same class as cocaine. And let's say that we give a low-level dose of cocaine to a 5-year-old when their brain is developing, before their baby teeth have even fallen out, and we keep that dose going. It's going to have an effect. And it's not going to be, 30 years of this. No, it's going to have an effect in about 3 months, if not instantly. And then I have parents that are like, well, I don't give it to them on the weekend or at summer break. I'm like, it doesn't even make sense.
So you've got 2 sides. You've got the financial incentive, and that's how you get people on, and kickback is the only term I can think of using for it. But then the other side is my younger one is certainly much more hyper than my older one, and doesn't sometimes seem to have an off switch. And in some circles, you could say actually that's ADHD, and we need to actually give drugs. Is this a way for teachers to just have an easier life? If they've got a large classroom, if a child is a little bit more agitated or hyper than others, they can just drug them and quietens it down, and the class is easier. Is it that kind of financial gain, but also an easier life within the classroom?
Yeah, because there's a couple of approaches to that. Yes, and even the term hyper, like when the psychiatric community started labeling children for being children, that's a problem. Oh, he's hyperactive. Damn right he's hyperactive. He's 5. What do we want? That's like labeling my basset hound hyper bitey. He's 3 months old. Yeah, dogs go through the puppy stage. And it's like, I use my book to compare my upbringing and what the modern is so that you come to a conclusion. I'm actually not even trying to lead somebody. I'm not saying, hey, you should not do this. Like, make up your own mind. But factual, I was born in 1964. I'm number 4 of 5 from my parents. My parents didn't get matching furniture until all 5 of us were out of the house. Why? Because when they went to the grocery store, we got our wiffle ball bats out. We had an Olympic stadium in the living room. They knew it. We would be running. If it was snowing outside, we took the play inside and would be playing tag and flicking each other with the dish towels. It was a noisy, rambunctious house. And my parents, they never said, hey, my dad would say, keep it to a dull roar. But it was never shut up. never sit down and watch TV all day, or wow, can I put a device in my children's hands? It was never that. We were never expected to be quiet. And in school, again, making the comparison to my son's first grade experience, which was 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock with a lunch break. And most of that time was seat work. And then he got 2 to 3 hours of homework every night. That is, to me, that's mind control. Because a 6-year-old is not equipped to handle that. Adults won't do homework unless they're being paid. So what's the payoff for my 6-year-old? Just drudgery. He hated school. And that happened. He started school in August. He hated it by the end of September. Like, he's a quick boy. So his mind was made up. My first grade was, we had a break in the morning, recess, 30 minutes. And it wasn't wild playtime. It was 30 minutes with the teacher on the playground, us holding hands, singing songs, whatever. Then we had lunch. Then we had a break in the afternoon. I did not get homework until I think the 4th grade, because it just was not allowed. And I remember in my kindergarten, which was non-academic, kindergarten, a police officer would come in, tell you how be nice to old people. You know, it was all very hands-on. You'd make things. You were always making things. There was a daily arts and crafts. There was singing. There was book time. You had to line up to go to the bathroom. You were learning social skills. In kindergarten, I told the teacher, I complained. I'm like, I want to read. I want to learn to read. She goes, Barbara, what's your hurry? That's for first graders. And that was for first graders. Now, for me as a homeschooler, if I had a 5-year-old that wanted to read, I would teach them to read. But that's me with 5 kids in my house. But my son was expected to write book reports before he could read. He was expected to know the difference between the D and the B before he practiced the difference between the D and the B. Maybe it would take him 2 weeks. Maybe it'd take him 2 months. Maybe it would take him 10 months. But it really doesn't matter. And again, the whole education system, like you say, we're bombarded with the drugs. The parents pick up on the lingo. Oh, he's hyperactive. I'm like, really? That's hilarious. Of course he is. They have more energy. They're growing.
And is that danger of being labeled? And you talked about not wanting your child to be labeled, and a label on a child can, be very harmful. It can put unnecessary expectations on them or doubts and fears on them whenever that's stabbed. And we've certainly experienced that in or understand the education system. You need to weave a line because you don't want certain labels, whatever they think. But it's this rush to label things that is a fairly newer phenomenon. It certainly didn't happen when I was growing up. It didn't happen when we were in school. It was just kids are kids. Now there's a rush to label. And I guess label gives them the ability to medicate or bring other action or to bring individuals in. And no, just let them enjoy school. But yeah, this labeling issue is huge.
Exactly. And when similar to you, I think I'm older than you by much, but when I went to school, there was no one labeled. I don't recall anyone in my class taking having to leave the class to take medication. But now there's a label for everything. If you are doing well in school in the United States, you are labeled gifted and you're put on an accelerated program because they're going to make sure they shut you down. You're competent. You know this. Well, we're going to load it on to make you sorry you ever raised that hand. And if you can't take it, then you have anxiety and there's a drug for that. Anyway, to me, the United States, and again, my opinion, has surrendered any rights of education to the psychologists and to the psychiatrists who have taken over. And then you find that the kids, their papers aren't even being graded anymore because they don't want to do, I forget what it's called, they don't want to lower the self-esteem. I'm like, you're going to kill their self-esteem if you don't tell them that 2 plus 2 actually has an answer. Oh, well, we let them do 6 because we want him to develop the critical thinking. I'm like, that's not critical thinking. The mind actually does that on its own if you let it grow the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, no, completely. The second part of the book, the middle part, gives a great overview of the education system, and you go through all different dates. There was one quote that stuck out with me, and it was Rockefeller Sr. saying, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers."
Yes.
And such a mindset, surely, you kind of think of the American dream, innovation, freedom to actually be who you want to be and be successful. And that's what the world has certainly seen on the US. But this movement, I think, from the West to formalize everything and remove any concept of imagination or innovation will be the other end of any nation, whether it's the US, the UK, wherever it is. But it was fascinating, the middle part of the book, going through that and talking about Rockefeller and the money he put in, and making the education system official and regimented and controlled, and taking away a lot of the freedom.
Yes, but people don't see it that way. You know, they want that A. And now, like, I'll tell you about a student that I worked with, who I don't speak about in the book. He was 16 years old, failed 8th grade 3 times. His aunt from Texas called me. It's like, hey, he just won't go to school. I'm like, send him to me. And it was right, excuse me, it was right before Christmas. And this boy comes in, very respectful. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to need to tutor you over Christmas break because your academics need like the electrodes for the heart. We have no time. But he was in 2nd grade in math. And he was allowed to stay in 2nd grade because he was learning disabled. So that label, not only does it destroy the child, but it justifies not teaching him because he can't learn anyway. So I tutored him over Christmas, an hour a day, 10 hours. First thing, I'm like, okay, 100 take away 81. He goes, I never learned how to do it. I am learning disabled. I am ADHD. There's something wrong with my mind. And I go, okay, so first thing, we're canceling all of it because it's not true. Second thing, here is $100 bill. You need to give me $81. Turn this $100 bill into 10 $10 bills. How much money do you have? Oh, $100. We didn't change anything. Now turn one of those 10s into ones. And in about 25 seconds, he learned how to do that type of math for the rest of his life. So we went from 100 take away 81. We were going into the millions and the billions because I'm like, Tony, you are not going to be able to succeed in life with a 2nd grade level of mathematics. You will never run your own business. You will never be your own boss. And in 10 hours, I got him to 8th grade mathematics. 10 hours. It took me to graduate him with the standard diploma. He had to stay till he was 19 because, like I say, it was a disaster. But he did the algebra 1, the geometry, the algebra 2, and he did it so well he could tutor it. Because that is the standard, is that you know it and can use it. But on all the mental health forms, which I go into in my book, you have in the United States, they're called different things, but like once the child gets labeled, they're given what's called an IEP, an individual educational plan. This is supposed to be individual to the child. Sounds great. They're all the same. Basically, they just change the name and the birth, the date, you know. Anyway, on that, you flip through and it's just a bunch of, to me, psychobabble, which it takes months to get these things. And I'm like, in 10 seconds, I determined exactly where Tony was at in math. I did not need a checklist. I did not need a PhD. I did not need anything. I could have done it with notebook paper. I didn't even need an assessment. I just need to know what I know and give him certain problems, and I can determine where he's at. Anyway, so on this IEP, then it gets into what you're going to do with the student subject by subject. Like how I'll use Tony as an example, though the example I'm going to give is not his IEP, but it would be similar. Tony is ADHD. Our goal, our measurable goal, is that when Tony is given grammar or language arts problems, he can solve the definition of the word with a 70% accuracy. When given grade level math or geometry, he can solve with 70% accuracy. And they go through all of the subjects that Tony's taking. And the goal, the measurable goal in writing, is 70% accuracy. And here's the parent showing me this, proud. They went through all of this. And I'm like, okay, have you ever had a kitchen remodel? Oh, yeah, we did one last year. I'm like, were you satisfied with 70% accuracy? Mom, do you ever get your nails done? Are you ever satisfied with the 70% accuracy? And they look at me like a light bulb just went off. I'm like, your son or your daughter deserves more than a 70% accuracy. The only standard there is 100%. And if your child truly is special needs, he or she's going to need care for the rest of their life, because it's impossible for them to get 100% accuracy on certain intellectual material, but not all. Like they should be able to feed themselves. Like those are called life skills. And when they're learning to use a stove, I'm not satisfied teaching somebody with special needs how to use a stove and 70% is good enough. It's crazy. And that's the standard of the United States. So they take, like my son, if we took my son and he never got an IEP because he was never labeled, they're having a fit because he's 70% accurate on his B's and D's. But yet after they do all the prodding and probing and testing and this, that, and the other and drugging, their standard is that it's okay that he has 70% accuracy. And I'm like, what was the point in all of that? What was the point?
I want to hear how homeschooling fits in. And I think the only person I've had on talking about homeschooling was Sam, but which is a concept that's maybe a bit different to us in Europe, because in some countries it's illegal to homeschool, but that's a whole lot. We'll not even get into that. But tell us, because I talked to some people and it's actually the education system needs improved, talk to others, and actually say, well, actually homeschooling has to be a major option. You've moved into seeing homeschooling as a perfect option for you, but also believing it can be a perfect option for others. Tell us how that fits in, why that is a solution to the mess, I guess, that you have seen in the state system.
Well, homeschooling gives the parent 100% control, right? Done right, it gives the child a challenge and a win. As I mentioned, I have 4 children. All 4 of my children are vastly different. They have different responses. One can't stand scary movies. One is all about spiders, like 3 boys and a girl. Completely different. They could have come from different mothers. That's how different they are. So to try to put them, let's say they were all born on the same day. I have quadruplets. They're still vastly different. So you have to address them educationally different. Now, you and I know they need to be able to read. They need to have grammar. They need to have some life skills. We know what they need to have. But we need to take what we know, and cater it to what they need and want. one of my children, Adam, twice before he was 5 years old, birds in the sky flew and landed on his shoulder. And I'm like, well, that's intense, like, and he's like, he named them instantly, like if it was planned. It's like, hey, Jake, how's it going? And I'm like, and Jake was this huge crow that in my mind, he's going to peck my son's eyes out, and here he is. And Adam isn't fearful at all. And I don't want to put my fear into it. But to me, that's a gift. I can't teach that. And my son was only interested in animals. He was not interested in history. He was like, for his reading material, he was interested in animals. So I call up his aunts and uncles, his grandparents from both sides of the family. I'm like, hey, Adam needs books on animals. He's learning to read. So let's, keep it simple. By the time he was 10, on his own, he had read 250 books on his own on animals. And he once asked me, he's like, where's the lemonade pitcher? I should have had red flags all over the place on that question, because what 10-year-old boy is going to want a lemonade pitcher? I'm like, oh, it's in the pantry behind blah, blah, blah. Half an hour later, he comes in. The lemonade pitcher has 71 egg sacs of a black widow spider and 4 black widow spiders in it with the lid on. And I'm like, Adam, what are we doing? He goes, well, I read that they are very quiet. They're not aggressive, but we had a place in the yard where I thought it would be best to move them because the yard guy's going to come and cut that down. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you were thinking of the survival of the black widow spiders, but they're now in my house. So anyway, I call up Miami Museum of Science and we go. And he donated the spiders to their exhibit. But this is him. Like he was once playing football in the front yard, and a Florida, they're called egrets, they look like storks, came. Its wing was at a weird angle and it landed right on him. And he told his friends, go get my mom. I need a rubber band and a dish towel. And he knew exactly. He put the dish towel over the head, secured it with a loose rubber band, and he had me call some wildlife preserve. But a 10-year-old boy knew exactly what to do because his homeschooling was around his love of animals. He was allowed to solve problems in mathematics concerning animals. Hey, it's not been raining for 4 or 5 days. What are you going to do about the lizards? Well, I'm going to, and he would go out and do a project. He wasn't on a device. He wasn't hooked to a TV. He wasn't bombarded with homework. He was using what he was learning in real life and solving problems. And it really served him well when he was a teenager. Then he was all about history and war and uniforms, and he would write these amazing essays as if he did something about World War II, that he was a teenager hitting that beach, seeing his friends die. And it was a great essay, but he is captivated with learning because he was homeschooled. That would never have happened in a regular school. He would not have been given the freedom. If anything, he would have been labeled as being difficult because he didn't want to read whatever they were pushing. And again, I know that reading is the top skill. You have to read words and understand what they mean to survive. Math comes next, then language and expressing yourself. My opinion. Anyway, that to me is the result of homeschooling. So for me, my next book, once I get this one up and running, is how to make a living homeschooling. Because since the pandemic, like what I did, the word micro school did not exist, because that's basically what I did when I took my son out of school. Is I had in my house 11 kids, including my 4. But there's a way to do it to where you can make money. It might not be Lamborghini money. I mean, unless you have Lamborghini friends. But I believe that right now people are fed up with the school system and they don't know the extent of why. The kid is cited with, oh, he's a troublemaker, doesn't like to do homework, he's lazy. I'm like, well, have you taken a look at what he's been given? It's no longer math. Math has been abandoned as a subject when my son was in school. So we're 40 years or 30 something years past that point. It's not improved. It's gotten 10 times worse. And now with the pandemic, all matter of justifications are on in the United States on why we're graduating so many kids who cannot read and write. And they don't know that they don't know. That's the dangerous thing. If you tell me, hey, I need you to do anything with a computer, basically, I'm going to tell you, Peter, I don't know how to do that. I have no lost pride. But right now, I have a whole generation, the United States has a whole generation of kids that don't know that they don't know. And they have no skills to survive. And that's frightening.
Can I tell the kind of the last point on the book, it takes time to write a book. Yes. I've never done it. I don't think I ever want to, but it takes time to sit down, discipline, bring everything together. You want to give a piece of information to the public through that. You want to give your story, but it's not just your story. How it connects into the education system, which is wider, and it's not just an American story. It could be a story here in the UK. It could be a story across Europe. It's that doesn't matter where you're geographically based, because we're all kind of having a similar battle. But what was when you sat down to put pen and paper, if I can use that term, on the book, what was your desire for the book? What did you see the purpose of the book? What did you want to accomplish with it?
Well, there's a couple of things. There's one, I want people to know what they're up against, because we have, like in the United States now, the pharmaceutical companies are no longer being looked at as the authorities, right? So there's a little bit of a shift in the reality. There needs to be a bigger shift in that reality. The school system. People are like, oh, well, I did great in school. I'm like, yeah, school's not the same. My kindergarten is nowhere close to the kindergartners that I'm getting in my school, who are 6 years old, who were placed on Prozac when they were 3 in a daycare. I'm like, who puts a 3-year-old on Prozac? How much attention or how much anxiety or how much mental health problems can a 3-year-old possibly have? And I know it's a lot if the parents aren't on board. But to me, we're labeling bad parenting as mental health issues and we're drugging the kid. It's the wrong target. So I want people to know that our children, not only are they being indoctrinated politically, and I don't touch the gender thing. I really haven't had any experience with that. But even that confusion, that basic confusion, it's school. And I could get the best dictionary and take a modern math textbook, and I will be frustrated within 3 minutes, because a modern math textbook is not trying to get that child to master math. It was written by somebody trained in psychology who thinks that they're using critical thinking skills instead of just simply the definition of the word sum is the answer to an addition problem. Write the sums here. Boom. Even multiple choice, that entered in after psychology came in. Can you imagine going to a heart surgeon and he's like multiple choicing your surgery? Like, I don't want that. I don't want that. But yet that's the standard. Oh, 70% accuracy, totally fine. As long as he's got that 70%. I'm like, well, what about the 30?
Yeah.
Multiple choice. He can guess it as long as he does well on a test. I'm like, no, our kids are being indoctrinated, one, to know that they don't matter and that they can't learn, and that there's a drug for everything and the authorities come first. Don't question the authority. If you do, you're going to be labeled with some label. So that was one of the reasons for writing the book. The other reason, I don't want to say this as like a self-flattery because it really isn't. But my kids are all grown. I just turned 60 and I have this small private school. It has 50 kids in it. In my school, I have 8 staff. I love my staff. They're parents like me or people really interested who have not been taught. They're not certified teachers, right? And we do great things. But this school was put there because I had my back up against the wall and it had to happen. So I'm on the last part of my life and I don't want my work to die when I die. So I wrote a book because I feel, and I don't have the money to even fund the dream, if you want to call it that. That sounds kind of lame, but to fund the next step, because the next step is I get a school in like a campus. I want 100 to 125 kids where I want to develop a teacher training. I don't want the college. I don't want what the college says is acceptable. I want to do it myself. And I realize that anyone who's in their 20s, 30s, or 40s, their education, if they were educated in the United States, is subpar. So we're going to have to fix that, which is not a hard fix if you have somebody willing, right? So develop teacher training. And then I want to create, I talk about a project. It's called Restore American Literacy. And I want to create a curriculum company that is very simple that I wish I would have had when I started homeschooling. This is what this is the perfect kindergarten day. Here are the games you need to get from Amazon. Here's the teacher guide. So even if you didn't get it growing up, you're going to get it here. And it's going to tell you definitions of words, very simply put. It's going to give you the discussion points, but it's also going to allow the teacher to put their personality in it. Because like if you're doing a lesson on dinosaurs, there's 100 ways you can take toilet paper tubes and make a giant dinosaur. I don't care. There's 100 ways to do that. And that's the creativity of the teacher, because I don't want to shut the teacher down. But right now, to do what I do, not bragging, you have to have a high IQ and you have to be motivated. And the school system is not graduating that anymore.
Oh, I 100% agree. I've really enjoyed going through, and I think the book is for anyone, giving them a window into the education system and what should be possible. It's called Enough is Enough, Exposing the Education System After Their Failed Attempt to Label and Drug My Son. Available if you're in the UK, it's available. If you're in the US, it's available. All the links are in the description. But Barbie, I really appreciate your time coming on and sharing your story and tell us a little bit